Discovering and testing exclusive fragrances for men. Awesome for tuning in, guys. Today we're going to look at a Tom Ford fragrance, the Ombre Leather. As you can see here, very, very unique smelling scent. But what I want to point out from testing different leather fragrances, I think this is an interesting option because let's say you are in a store and you're testing that Tom Ford Ombre Leather fragrance for men. Then obviously you're probably first going to spray it on a tester strip, and some people, they just smell the initial leather opening, and then maybe if they are not into leather, they are dismissing it. So even if you are not into leather fragrances, I encourage you to let it dry down, because from my experience, the leather opening transitions rather quickly and turns the fragrance, brings out other nuances that I personally really enjoy. And yeah, not all leather fragrances are created equal. Maybe if you have a really hardcore leather fragrance or a Tom Ford Tuscan leather, that is probably a little bit maybe more bitter and stronger. But this turns out to be really nice, cozy and sweet. Why do I like this fragrance so much? When do I enjoy wearing it? What are good seasons to wear this in my opinion? Which seasons may not be as good to wear this? Excellent. Now we have a closer look at the Tom Ford Ombre Leather, which is a perfect entry-level leather fragrance, king of leather fragrances, at least for people who want to start out, I think. Obviously, if you're like super into this genre of fragrances, maybe the leather note is not going to last long enough for you. But I think this is perfect, because while I enjoy this leathery opening, what I enjoy even more is the very nice dry down that also seems to resonate with the ladies pretty good. This is the batch code, and checking the batch code, you can also compare it with the bottom of the packaging. It's a little bit hard to read. Apologize for this smudge right here. So checking the batch code of my bottle at the site, you see checkfresh.com. That's what it says the age of that bottle is when it was produced. If you have never owned a leather fragrance, please don't get discouraged by the opening. The fragrance progresses very nicely, and why don't we just go ahead and look at the notes. Wonderful. Then now we have a close look at Tom Ford Ombre Leather in part 3 of this video, and I sprayed some on my tester strip for testing purposes, and you can see in the side card the facts or data that I've gathered about the fragrance. You see it's an eau de parfum. I think for an eau de parfum concentration, this is actually pretty strong. I noticed that it on some clothes, I think on clothes that have synthetic fibers, it lasts surprisingly long. I'm going to tell you in a second why. It's from 2018 if I'm not mistaken, so it's a relatively new scent that just came out a few years ago. The perfumer is Sonia Constant, and I would describe the fragrance as leathery, a little bit warm, sweet, and definitely to my nose, depending on how much you apply, it can be very intense. And yeah, the opening of Ombre Leather, I remember vividly when I first went to the store, I sprayed some on the tester strip, and I was like still a little bit newer to fragrances back then when this came out. So I sprayed it on a tester strip, I was smelling it and was like, ooh, leather fragrance. I've never had a leather fragrance before. And I took the testing strip with me, and during the day I repeatedly took some sniffs, and I really liked the way the scent develops. So it opens up with definitely with a strong leather note, but that leather note declines over time, and I found when you first spray this, it comes across very leathery and even a little bit bitter, but the bitterness, and that's very nice about Tom Ford Ombre Leather, is balanced out against also some sweetness. And I like that that the leathery note disappears over time, and then the sweetness, the space comes out. So it has this really nice transition, and I like the way that this fragrance performs. And one interesting thing, earlier this year I wore this fragrance again, and I sprayed something on my neck, and then I was wearing my tactical jacket here, and something rubbed off against the collar here, and that stayed on that jacket for days and days, and even after a week I would still smell it. So ever since I wore this jacket and Ombre Leather, I'm really asking myself, If that fragrance, if you spray it on the skin, maybe it has a slightly different longevity as opposed to maybe you spray it on some clothes that have natural fibers like cotton fibers versus you have maybe something that has synthetic fibers. I really feel this clings to something that has synthetic fibers for some reason. But guys, I digress, but just as an interesting side note, let's quickly look at the notes. So we see we have saffron, cardamom, leather, jasmine, sambac, amber, moss, and patchouli. I just sprayed this on a tester strip. I still get mostly this leathery opening, but it definitely has a very nice dry down. Now, jumping to the conclusion, for whom could that be an interesting scent? Maybe for someone, or I think this could be an excellent scent for someone who has never owned a leather fragrance like me before. That's what was the case with me. I never owned a leather fragrance before. I wanted to learn more about leather fragrances, and from my research, the private blend, the Tuscan leather, often was perceived a little bit too strong, a little bit too leathery, and also more pricey. So the Tom Ford Ombre Leather, I think, was a really great alternative because it's not too leathery, and the leathery note in the beginning tapers off, and then you have this a little bit richer sweetness that gives this fragrance, I think, its main character, and it's nicely balanced out against each other. So really, I think a wonderful starter fragrance, a starter leather fragrance. If you have never owned a leather fragrance before, don't be discouraged. Maybe you're gonna enjoy it. I really love to have variety in my fragrance collection, and Tom Ford always makes a very unique sense. So if you want a standard mainstream fragrance, that's probably not for you. But if you want something that's a little bit more unique, then that could be a great alternative. And I also hear the story somewhere that this was inspired by Tom Ford living on a ranch somewhere. And on the ranch you have the horses, and obviously they have this leather. So how do you say the leather? The thing that you put on the horse where you sit on, guys. I'm German, so I don't know all the English words. It's actually kind of funny. Every time I travel to the US, I order some food. There are always new words that I have to learn. So, but this was supposedly inspired by Tom Ford's ranch. Kind of interesting side note, interesting caveat. Guys, awesome for tuning in. Let me know what your favorite fragrances are so that I can review them as well. Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see some other fragrance reviews here on my channel page, which I just shown you, there are a lot of playlists. I'm constantly adding new videos, so the channel is going to grow very nicely, and you can find mainstream fragrances, but also niche fragrances, or a little bit more creative fragrances like from Tom Ford and other brands. So you get a well-rounded impression of the fragrance market. Awesome for tuning in. I see you hopefully as a subscriber, and in the next video. Take care. Very nice. And if you're interested in exclusive niche fragrances, or you want to learn more about the Parfums de Marly, I have tested here these Parfums de Marly samples and introduced the individual fragrances to you after giving them a couple of wearings, and give you a note breakdown. You can find that on my channel page in the playlist samples, I believe. And yeah, you can subscribe right now as well if you want to. I hope you have a pleasant day, and I'll see you next video. Take care.